A reading from the book of Job. The Lord answered Job out of the whirlwind. Who is this that darkens counsel by words without knowledge? Gird up your loins like a man. I will question you, and you shall declare to me. Where were you when I laid the foundation of the earth? Tell me, if you have understanding, who determined its measurements? Surely you know. Or who stretched the line upon it? On what were its bases sunk? On who laid its cornerstone? When the morning stars sang together and all the heavenly beings shouted for joy. Can you lift up your voice to the clouds so that a flood of waters might cover you? Can you send forth lightnings so that they may go and say to you, here we are? Who has put wisdom in the inward parts, or given understanding to the mind? Who has the wisdom to number the clouds? Or who can tilt the waterskins of the heavens? When the dust runs into a mass and the clods cling together, can you hunt the prey for the lion, or satisfy the appetite of the young lions when they crouch in their dens or lie in wait in their covert? Who provides for the raven its prey when its young ones cry to God and wander about the lack of food? This is the second of a three-part sermon on the book of Job. If you remember from last week, Job, a good and righteous man, and once wealthy, had lost everything that he had owned, endured the death of his 10 children, and was covered from head to toe with loathsome sores. Job bitterly complained against God, trying to understand how God could allow such a great calamity to befall him. I also recounted the story of my youth, how over the course of a few years I experienced in rapid succession the violent deaths of my 3 closest friends. 3 times over the course of 6 years, I donned an ill-fitting black suit and took my place among 6 somber young men, each clutching a handle fitted to the side of a casket, and together we carried the cold bodies of our comrades to their graves. Like Job, I too complained, and more mightily with each death. I couldn't understand how God could allow such promising young men to die so senselessly. Job's friends, Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar, hearing of his troubles, came together to console and comfort him and to suffer alongside him. Eventually, however, they sought explanations, and the question arose, what had Job done wrong? The friends observed that a just and powerful God would surely not allow a righteous man to suffer such a great calamity. So they concluded that Job must have sinned. Job goes back and forth between claiming that he does not deserve the suffering he has received and saying that he could accept it if he could only be told what he had done wrong. I've seen parents who have lost children go through a similar thought process. Blaming themselves, they try to imagine what they could have done differently, something that might have averted the death of their child. With the death of each of my friends, I experienced the same kind of thoughts. When Peachy died, I recalled how I had enthusiastically encouraged him to embark on his adventure to the Middle East, where he eventually met his death. After Pat's death atop an electrical power line, I couldn't help but remember that I had connected him with my brother Gene, who had hired him for the job with the electric company. But it was the loss of Keith, our quarterback, that caused me the most consternation. I couldn't be sure, but it was likely my missed block that allowed the linebacker to charge untouched through the offensive line and drive Keith's body onto the playing field's hard surface. For years, I thought, what if I'd been quicker stronger, more alert. Perhaps I could have stopped the blitz and Keith would have known manhood. Job's friends tried to convince him that he must have been at fault, since a just and powerful God would otherwise not have permitted his calamity. I didn't need anyone else to persuade me, since at the time I had been taught and held fast to the belief in a good and all-powerful God. I could only conclude that I was to blame. In today's reading, the Lord answered Job out of the whirlwind. Where were you when I laid the foundation of the earth? Is the first of dozens of questions that the Lord asked Job. Can you make it rain? Can you send forth lightning? Can you cause the dawn to know its place? Have you entered the storehouses of the snow? Can you bind the chains of Pleiades or loose the cords of Orion? Do you know where the mountain goats give birth? Is it by your wisdom that the hawk soars? And one question after another, the Lord contrasts his power over the natural world with the feeble power of Job. And the Lord concludes the survey of his power over the created world by saying, shall a fault finder contend with the Almighty? My personal fault finding persisted for some time, alternately seeking first to blame God and then shifting the blame to myself. When the Lord came to Job, the voice of the Lord came from inside a whirlwind, and the voice spoke of the wonders of nature. Finding no answers to my quandary, I left the church and thought that I had left God behind as well. Yet when I look back over those 20 years when I imagined that God had forsaken me, and I in turn walked away from God, I understand now that the Lord was still speaking to me through a voice out of the whirlwind. It wasn't so much that I was seeking to reconnect with God during those 2 decades, but that God was making God's presence known to me through the natural world. I was never quite content when I remained indoors. Truth be told, I'm still not. I often hiked through the mountains of northern New Mexico, Big Bend, and the piney woods of East Texas. I canoed countless rivers. The total number of miles I've ran is more than the distance around the globe. I bicycled across the United States twice, and through every sunset, every bolt of lightning, every meteor shower, gentle breeze, and soaring hawk I encountered a God who was addressing me, reaching out to me, and sustaining the connection that I had shunned. And like Job, when confronted with the power of the Creator, I too was humbled. I wasn't consciously seeking God, but God was seeking me. Martin Buber makes a distinction between theology, an intellectual exploration on the nature of God and how God works in the world, and religion, the life-changing experience of sensing the actual presence of God. In between the passage from Job we read last Sunday and the one we read today, Job and his friends spend 35 chapters arguing with one another about theology. And then, from out of a whirlwind, God appears to Job, and the theological questions fall away. As my good friend Bill Richards once said, once you have plunged into the ocean, does it really matter whether or not you believe in water? Job has a direct encounter with the divine. He gets religion, and he is never the same. From the whirlwind, God continues to speak of his might, saying, who cut a channel for the torrents and a path for the thunderstorm, to rain down on the uninhabited land, on the wilderness where no man is? Harold Kushner points out that in these verses and those that follow, there's no specific reference to humankind. It's as if God is saying that humans are not at the center of the universe, and that God's concern is universal, not just for the well being of a particular group of people. Job was humbled by God's argument, but I don't know that he was persuaded. I don't know that I would have been either. But in the animist kind of religion I practiced at the time, I could see God's hand in nature. A God who spoke from the whirlwind, who could number the clouds, caused the wings of the ostrich to beat joyously, and the eagle to soar at his command. That was my kind of God, and that was enough, at least for the time being. We'll continue with the final installment of the series of Job next Sunday.